Halloween of 2019 was the most terrifying night of my life. Living in Australia, where Halloween isn't celebrated with as much enthusiasm, trick-or-treaters are rare, maybe 5 or 6 at most. Despite this, I've always loved the holiday, much to the dismay of my parents, who prefer to ignore it. That year, I was in charge of decorations and handing out candy. Unfortunately, Halloween fell on a school night, and a storm rolled in just after 6 o'clock, rendering my hours of preparation practically useless. Still, I decided to wait for any potential trick-or-treaters in the living room, passing the time by watching The Conjuring. Around 7:30 p.m., my phone buzzed with a message in our group chat from my friend M, asking if anyone wanted to mess around and go trick-or-treating. I was surprised. None of us had gone trick-or-treating in over 5 years, but it sounded like a fun way to salvage the evening. My other friends, S, C, and H, quickly agreed. Strangely, M replied that he couldn't make it, but suggested we visit a specific house, claiming it had lots of candy. Although it was odd for M to propose this and then back out, we decided to go anyway. Within half an hour, the 4 of us met up at the house M had mentioned. It looked unremarkable, except for a large table on the porch with a pumpkin bowl brimming with lollipops. After glancing at the windows to make sure no one was watching, we emptied most of the bowl between us, leaving a few to avoid suspicion. Just as we turned to leave, we froze. 2 men dressed as clowns were approaching us up the driveway. They wore oversized smiles painted on their faces and tilted their heads unnaturally as they walked. The sight sent shivers down my spine, and when one of my friends screamed, the clowns suddenly bolted toward us. One of them squeaked its rubber nose as they chased us. We ran as fast as we could, adrenaline coursing through our veins. After what felt like an eternity, we finally managed to lose them. Shaken and out of breath, we decided to head to M's house, believing it would be a safe place to regroup and figure out what had just happened. However, when M answered the door, he burst into laughter. "What are you guys doing?" he asked, confused. We told him about his message suggesting trick-or-treating. "I lost my phone earlier today," he replied, his smile fading. The realization hit us like a punch. Someone else had been using M's phone to lure us to that house. After sitting in M's living room and piecing things together, we cautiously made our way home by 9:30 p.m. Trying to calm my nerves, I finished my movie and stepped outside to collect the candy bowl I had left on the porch. To my surprise, the bowl was empty. My stomach turned when I noticed a clown nose sitting inside it. Panicking, I told my parents everything. They reassured me it was just an elaborate Halloween prank, but I couldn't shake the feeling of dread. Later that night, around 1 a.m., I woke up to the sound of rocks hitting my bedroom window. Despite my fear, curiosity got the better of me, and I peeked through the blinds. My Halloween decorations were destroyed, scattered across the lawn. As I stared in shock, a lollipop suddenly hit the glass, snapping me out of my trance. That's when I saw them. The 2 clowns perched on my neighbor's roof, silently watching me. My scream echoed through the house as I bolted to my parents' room. The rest of the night was a blur. The police were called, but when they arrived, the clowns were nowhere to be found. Officers promised to investigate the house we had visited earlier. The next morning, they informed us it was abandoned, and M's missing phone had been discovered inside. At school, I learned that S, C, and H had also experienced creepy encounters during the night. I don't know if the clowns followed us home, or if they had used M's phone to track us somehow. Now, as Halloween approaches again, I can't help but feel a deep sense of unease. I'm terrified they might return. Halloween used to be one of my favorite holidays now. I kind of just enjoy it when I have a decent party to go to. In 2018, when I was a senior in college, my friend Tracy's sorority was going to be throwing a big Halloween party at the sorority house. She said I could bring one friend since they didn't want too many outsiders at the party, so I invited my best friend Cody. We're very last-minute people when it comes to Halloween costumes. The party was that night, and we didn't have anything. Cody was working late, so he'd have to meet me right before the party, so he asked me to get a costume for him, and he just venomed me the money. I ran to the nearby Spirit Halloween store that opened up like 5 minutes from my house. I was just shotgunning it. I picked a Wars Waldo costume for myself, and a Superman costume for Cody, both 2 of the cheaper costumes they had. Everything was normal until I got to the cashier. I was on the phone with Cody telling him about the costume. I got him and giving him details about the party. I told him which sorority it was that Tracy got us. The invite gave him the address, and then he convinced me to pick him up instead of us just meeting, stuff like that. All of this was said as the cashier was watching me. He was some guy who was decently older than me, but because of his receding hairline, I couldn't put a gauge on it as to whether he was in his 30s or low 40s. He wore glasses though, and had a skinny-ish build and an awkward presence. As he rang up the 2 costumes, he had a comment something along the lines of sounds like, "You have a fun party tonight, huh?" I chuckled and said, "Yeah." Then he started asking more details like if it's open invite, and had a comment about there being lots of girls. I said, "It's closed invite," and that I barely got an invite. He said it's all good. Then he shook my hand and introduced himself as Mike, so I did the same, and told him my name was Sean and I left. It was weird. Fast forward to later that night, I picked up Cody, and we arrived to the party around 10 p.m. It sounded loud inside, and there were multiple groups of people entering the house before us. At the door, a girl asked us who we knew there, and I told her Tracy. She let us in, and we were in this huge living room area, music blasting, all the lights dimmed low. Halloween decorations everywhere, and to top it off, people with red cups full of booze crowding the place. We saw Tracy and hung around her. For a while, we played beer, pong, and other drinking games. It was a very legit party. But then, at some point, there was a commotion by the front door area. Cody, Tracy, and I and a few others walked over, and the girl at the door started calling out, "Where's Tracy?" She came forward and the girl asked, "Who is Shan?" I said, "I am." Then she asked me who that creepy guy we invited was. I was confused and said, "Who?" She described some older-looking men in a cowboy costume with a fake mustache. He apparently inappropriately touched one of the girls, trying to get her into a separate room, and she screamed for help. Then he took off with something in his pocket. None of the guys chased after him or anything. Immediately, I thought of the cashier from Spirit Halloween. I told them about it, and everyone got even more creep out. The party went on, but they were a lot more cautious about who they were letting in, and they even considered calling the cops for a second. That whole thing really killed my vibe, and we didn't stay much longer after that. In total, we were probably at the party for a couple hours at most. We left a little past midnight. I think I didn't drink much as I started my car. The car parked like 2 cars behind us, also turned on, and as I drove in the direction of Cody's house, the car started to follow. Cody and I were sure it had to be him. After it made 4 of the same turns, so I pulled to the side of the road, egging him on to pull over, but the car just stopped for a few seconds, then basically floored it past us. We didn't get a good look at who was inside, but I'm still positive it was him. After dropping off Cody down the block from his house, just being cautious, I was staying very aware of my surroundings, and because of that, I noticed a car in the near distance with its lights off tailing me. It looked like the same car. I got to a main road once again, pulled over and waited. The car once again waited, and then, a few seconds later, turned on its lights and floored it in the far left lane, passing night. I was obviously shook and drove home as fast as I could, while I was sure I wasn't being followed. I called that Spirit Halloween location the next day and reported the cashier. They thanked me for the information, but I never went back there, so I wouldn't know if he was fired or anything. Looking back, I wonder if I could have and should have pressed charges regardless. I have no idea what he could have possibly wanted from me, but either way, I'm happy he didn't find out where I live.